Welcome to Biz Alchemy, a podcast about creating a new business paradigm by women, for women. I'm your alchemical host, Jacquelyn, and I'm going to take you on an extraordinary adventure to create a business filled with ease, fun, spaciousness, and abundance. Hustle, be gone. Let's birth a new way. You are in for a treat with this podcast episode. This chat with Esther Lemmens is best described as a colourful tapestry because we weave our way through a multitude of topics, from trusting your inner guidance to channeling to light language to finding our unique voice in business, the throat chakra. There's just so much that we cover. Esther's a creative rebel, intuitive designer, and queer mystic. She's also an artist, a podcaster, a budding writer, truth seeker, and gentle activist. Her motto, do your thing your way, which I adore because that is actually what the Biz Alchemy podcast is all about. Esther was one of my first clients, and so we've been on quite a journey together over the years. That does make for a lot of conversation. So I suggest you get a cuppa, get comfy in your favourite armchair, and enjoy this inspirational conversation. Esther, was there a turning point when you realised that you had to move away from the patriarchal model of business and create a new paradigm for your business?
Well, I would say absolutely yes. And also, I think the moment it was more of a series of moments. It's very much a journey, isn't it, really? But I think there were like glimpses of it. And I think that shows up in very subtle ways. And I think that is part of the puzzle, actually, of embracing more of like your inner guidance and intuition. Like you just get a sense of something, like something's off, something's not right, something's not working. And I think that just gets kind of louder and louder over time, especially if you ignore it, right? But also, I think if you do listen, it is still a journey. You know, it's something that will never end. And there's always more, not as in not enough now, but just more. What's next? You know, so yeah, in that way, I see it.
Yeah, because it's a journey of evolution, because as you expand, then you're able to see more that you couldn't see before.
Yeah.
You weren't meant to see before. It's like, yes, you're right. You have to go through the stages, don't you?
Yeah, like you get to this next level and then you've got a new viewpoint, haven't you? It's like going up this, I don't know, I like to see it as a spiral staircase, really. It's just a different perspective from each turn you take, as it were. I think working with you has actually taught me that rather than it just being this thing you need to figure out, you know, there's maybe you become aware of things that maybe are in your way, or how you're self-sabotaging, you know, or all that stuff. And you think about, okay, I need to just maybe fix this. I need to solve this. I need to release this. I need to heal this, you know, all this stuff. And there's value in that, absolutely. But also it's not this thing that you accomplish and then you tick it off the list and then you're done. You know, you're set, basically. You've figured it out. You've got your shit together, and that's that. So I feel like one of the main things that I've learned from our work together is what is ready now to be looked at. What is coming up now, like in our sessions, that has been really powerful. So what's ready now? Let's look at that. And it's like this like little adjustment of sorts, maybe just a little a twang of something, you know, there's this little energetic like ping, and then you move again. It's almost like getting you unstuck, and then you move again, and then you get to another point where you're like, oh, not necessarily stuck, but just, you know, figuring the next step out. You don't have to be stuck necessarily, you know. So that's kind of how I see it. There's always a different level of a jumping off point or perspective, really. Yeah, because it is a journey, isn't it? And actually, just because before I got on here and I was thinking about our journey together, because it's so interesting, because I think it must be at least 4 years since we first connected. And at the time, I was doing interviews to find out who my ideal client was, really. And you volunteered for an interview in exchange for a free throat chakra clearing session. Yeah.
And when I look back at that time, I was really just getting started on the way my journey looks now at that point. And my journey has been considerable in that time, but so has yours. And I thought that was really interesting because I remember, you put up your hand to say, yes, I'll answer questions about my throat chakra. And so I was thinking about your throat chakra because how has your evolution of your throat chakra even been through your business over that 4 years? Like looking at how your business changed going in, and I mean, maybe you want to talk a bit about this, about from your business as a graphic designer and then going into the podcast. And so, yeah, I'd just be interested for you to chat about that journey and about your evolution of your throat chakra in that process.
Oh gosh, yeah. And that makes such a good point in and of itself. So looking back, saying yes to something that might have seemed like a little thing, but the way it then affected my journey after was so big. So I think sometimes we underestimate the power of those little intuitive nudges, and it's so important. That's part of the journey, I feel, for me especially, to learn to listen to them and really trust them. So yeah, I feel like I've really been finding my voice. It's really interesting. I feel like I had to shed a ton of like old conditioning and even just realizing that was there. I almost see it as like this, it's like this cage you're in, but you don't know you're in it. And that's where I think privilege comes in, and intersectionality as well, which has been part of my journey especially. It's like, just because my cage is bigger than others' cages doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean I'm not captured in that or restricted by that in some way. And I think seeing like the marginalized people, and like me working with people who are gender diverse and stuff, very much a marginalized group, seeing other people's cages makes you more aware of your own, and that makes you like question everything. And that's been a big part of my journey, just questioning everything. Why do we do things the way we do I actually want that for myself, or am I just doing it because that's what you do, that's what society says you should be conforming to, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like clearing my throat chakra has definitely been a big part of that. Wow. And I love I think, I don't know if you were the first person I listened to when it came to light language, but that was something that just really caught me. And I was like, what is this strange magic, But I think before that, I found, weirdly enough, I'm a Trekkie, I'm a big Trekkie. So I was watching Star Trek Discovery, and Klingon, like the language of Klingon, all of a sudden it just caught me. And I was like, I want to learn this language. So I found it on Duolingo, of all places. And I feel like that was very much a part of the journey as well. So again, it was this little nudge, and like my rational brain was like, why are you learning Klingon? It's not like you're going to go on holiday and use it somewhere, is it? Why? What on earth? What on earth? But because the language is like, it's really powerfully spoken, you use your mouth and your tongue in very different ways because of different sounds. It's also very complex, very small vocabulary, but very complex grammar and everything. So it just, it did, I don't know, it just awakened maybe parts of my throat and my voice and my brain that I felt like were going to be a part of the journey, So again, I kind of trusted that and took it forward. And yeah, so those were all these little things were, part of it and stuff. And more recently, when I discovered the light language, I feel like the verbal part of it is something that I'm not quite there with. I don't know if that is the way I'm going, or if that's the direction I'm going in. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely getting it with the visuals. I get lots of visuals now, like something's opened, codes and light language and all that stuff comes to me in visual form and also in movement form. So that's been really fun, and that feels quite that feels very flowy and easy, especially the movement. It's almost dancey. And I feel like I'm just going to go with that. So if that feels good for me to do, then I'm just going to keep doing that. And also the visuals. And then it all came together in how I can work with people. Because I think in the past, when I've been doing it in a way of like strategy and processes and, doing all the practical stuff, obviously that's work that needs to be done. But for me, it didn't come from like an inside place. It just came from other people say you have to do this thing. So I feel like I was caught in the hustle for quite a while before I figured out, like, as I connected more to my own guidance and my own soul, it just kept pulling me back, because I'm very much a person like, oh, shiny thing, let's go and play with it. Or like, oh yeah, let's do this thing, like manifesting generator problems, right? I want to do all the things all the time. So I just had to, I think my soul was like busy reining me in, like, just slow down for God's sake, so that was part of the process. It took quite a while, I must admit. That was not like an overnight thing. So I had to really learn to slow down and learn to sort of stand on the spot, and rather than jump into action and be a bit of a headless chicken about it, I just had to be like, pause, and then go inside and take aligned action from the inside out. And that's been serving me very well. I mean, it's very much a challenge at times, because I still want to do all the things all the time. But also it's so important for me to rest. And I've been having therapy as well. So I feel like this is all stuff like to do with clearing the conditioning. Like I'm just brought up as this major people pleaser, which a lot of women are, let's face it, of my age especially. I think younger too, but like that's been such a big part of like the I don't know, what the woman archetype, I suppose, or the, how women are.
Yes.
That's a whole other story. Anyway, so yeah, like people pleasing, lack of boundaries, disconnected from my own needs, all that stuff. So that was all part of the puzzle in the last few years that I've been not figuring out, but like connecting to, and, becoming more aware of. And I think as I integrate all these things, like things about myself, clearing old stuff out, how do I want to be in the world? What is mine and what is not? Questioning everything, just figuring all this stuff out, all these different pieces. And I feel like they're really sort of coming together in a way that how I work with people, or how I want to work with people, feels good. And I also, it was linked to like visibility as well, like, because if you don't have boundaries or good boundaries, and you feel like you can't say no to people without having a good reason or all that stuff, then how can you show up and be visible? Because you're like, oh yeah, I do want work, but I don't want certain people to find me because they might not be a good fit, and then I can't say no to them. Do you know what I mean? It's all so entangled. So as soon as you get to that place of like, oh, that makes sense now, and I don't have to work with someone just because they get in touch with me and want to work with me. It needs to be a match. It needs to be a fit. Otherwise, I'm wasting my time and theirs, and I'm actually stopping them from finding the right people to work with as well. So it's okay to be like, I'm sorry, I don't think this is a fit. And that's still difficult sometimes. This is a learning process, but that's very much part of it for me as well. So this is where I say, what was the question? Because I feel like I went off on a tangent.
I know. I was just thinking, you've just about summed up my work in 5 minutes. That's what I do.
Yeah. Gosh.
Oh gosh. The question was about your evolution and the throat chakra and so on. And the throat chakra just proved that it is very active now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is what I was like as a kid, actually. I think I was very chatty, and just like, I think I got told off for talking too much, especially in school, stuff like that. And it's really interesting how we are these, like as a kid, we're just so full of wonder and full of expression, and it all just gets, dampened down and toned down. And even little things that a person might say that people don't even think about, like, oh, you're too this or you're too that. You integrate that and you internalize it, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to clear that shit out again, Yeah. And I think also my neurodivergence has been part of it, because this is something that again, the intersectionality, like I talk to a lot of gender diverse folks, and a lot of them are also neurodivergent. And it just made me think about my own, my own journey, I suppose, being a kid, growing up, how I was with people, always feeling misunderstood, being bullied, all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, now I have these, especially in the last podcast conversation I had was with someone who is autistic. And some of the things they were saying about their experience, I was like, oh, do you know what I mean? When you get these moments, you're like, oh, and things just start clicking into place. And you're like, hindsight. And it's just like, oh my goodness. So yeah, I feel like I don't know what that looks like exactly. I think I definitely have some autistic traits about me. And I think as a kid, but it was very much underdiagnosed, especially in women. I think it still is. Because I think when I was young, autism showed up in this just quite an extreme way, that people who had trouble communicating and like very difficult to, with socializing and all that kind of stuff. And there's now the knowledge that it's more of a spectrum. It's more of a, not even two-dimensional, I suppose. So it's really interesting to look into stuff like that and just learn stuff about myself and accepting myself and embracing all those parts of me and just integrating all that together. Again, tangent. What were we just talking about?
This is the flow of the podcast.
This is the flow.
Esther. But you remind me, because I did speak with Carol Fair about her diagnosis of a year ago of ADHD, and one of the things she talked about so much was how it has helped her to realize how much she needed to get in touch with her intuition, like how important it was for her to depend on her intuition to guide her, and actually the answers were there in that. And in some ways you're expressing the same thing. It takes you back. You don't look out there for the answers. It's like, okay, this is how I'm functioning, so it's up to my intuition to guide me as how to show up most effectively in this way. And it's actually, regardless of who you are, this is what I'm talking about for everyone in business. It's like, stop looking out there and go in and let the inside guide you. So it's coming from the inner out instead of the outer in. And that's what I was just thinking as you were sharing all that. It's so interesting. This message is coming from different angles now, and yet it's that one message. It's like, go in, you have the answers, you know the way, you do not have to depend on others telling you how to do it. And with that cage dissolves. That cage that you talked about.
Such a good point. Yeah. Yeah, it is all about trusting your inner guidance, and we just tend so much to look outwards and look at other people and say, please tell me what to do, tell me where to go, tell me which decisions to make. And it's kind of understandable if you've never learned to really trust your own guidance, right? That's how it is. And it's not to say that you don't need other people sometimes, because I think from our own perspective it can be limited. You have a limited access to things, because when I say limited, I mean it in the most loving and nicest, best possible way, because we all have our own perspective. And sometimes it takes outside stuff to, I don't know, get us unstuck or give us a different perspective or a different outlook or different ideas. But that's different than being tell me what to do, tell me where to go, because that is stuff that needs to come from the inside out. It's all a balance, isn't it, really? Yeah.
Exactly. And observing you, and especially in the last, I suppose, year, 18 months since you've opened yourself to the channeling more, do you feel that has come as a result of this internal journey of trusting your intuitive voice more? Is that what has allowed the energy, for you to open up, to allow the energies to flow through you?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Yeah, it's an evolution in that way of my own journey. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because looking back, it's always like hindsight, isn't it? If someone would have told me, oh, you're going to be doing channeling and this is what you're going to be, I would be like, don't be ridiculous. I don't do that. That's not me. But then you never know, do you, really? Or the direction kind of life takes you in, and what wave to ride or sort of jump on as it comes past, same with the podcast, to be honest. But I feel like the podcast has been such a big part of my journey in so many different ways that I'd never even imagined. And that was also a process where I took a step, because in the beginning it was it started with a book idea.
I remember.
Let's make a book. Yeah, let's make a book of 50 stories of gender diverse folks just from here in Norwich, where I live, or surrounding areas. And then that was an idea. And then that was not shelved consciously, but it just what it's like. Ideas come up and then they sort of, settle again. Let's call it settle. And then sometimes I know when something needs my attention, it just keeps popping up into my head, hello, 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 just more and more so. And then I start paying attention to it. And then the next step, like, what do you do next? Like, if you think of making this thing, it can be really overwhelming, like, oh, making this book, like, but how do you break it down? So I thought, let's just have one conversation with one person. That might be how you started your podcast. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you think of starting a podcast and like the work it takes and the momentum and how you have to keep it, you know, the energy, you don't have to keep the energy moving, but like, if you want to keep doing it, the energy has to be moving, right? So it can be quite a big thing. So how do you break it down? You start with one conversation. And then, so I had one conversation that I recorded with a friend. I didn't even know what I was going to talk about. Do you know what I mean? It was, again, one of these nudges, like, just do that. Just start there, do that. Don't worry about the technicalities. Just do it. And then you'll know the next step to take. So then, as I had this recording, I thought I'll have it transcribed and then I'll have a chapter of the book. And then I thought, but why don't I use the audio? So then the idea for the podcast was born. And then it took me about a year and a half, I think, to gather more conversations, have more conversations with people. And then, then I just put one episode out. I was really stuck with stuff. And I thought, I need this and I need music and I need to decide this and that, you know, all the things. I'm very much a details person. And that gets me stuck like a lot of the time. And I just go down rabbit holes and then you don't see me for days. And then I'm like, what was I doing? I'm so overwhelmed. Let's just forget everything because I can't cope, you know. But then, I took another step. I put an episode out. And then I was like, oh, goodness me, what have I done? Now I have to keep this up. But then I kept taking steps, step after step after step. And that's where I am now. So we've probably got about, I think we started our pods around the same time, didn't we? So I've got, I did go from one episode a week to one every 2 weeks last October. And that was a good decision. But it was very difficult for me because part of me was like, oh, no, surely that won't do. You know, that's not dedicated enough. So I kind of had to get over myself in that way. But it was definitely the right decision for me because it was all encompassing. I do all the things for it myself. And it was just like, it was a full-time job that I was doing without being paid for it, you know, and I had just no space and time for other stuff. And I was like, this is just not. And it started to feel a bit heavy. And I was like, this is not the energy I want to bring to this. So I feel like it's really good to be aware of that stuff earlier and to be like, I'm not going to let it get so frustrating and overwhelming that it's just going to fizzle out and I'm just going to be like having a nervous breakdown. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like that. I'm actually feeling a sense of there's something not quite working. Something needs to change, basically. Something needs to change. So that's when I went to, fortnightly episodes every 2 weeks. And I feel like that freed me up like a lot more. So then, I had more space for other things. It felt more fun again. And I feel like I have a really nice way of working now with it. That feels like it's part of my life, but it's not like all of my life, you know?
And it's that giving yourself permission. It's that thing of there are no rules.
Yeah.
You know, you make the rules.
Yeah.
And yet we forget that and we get caught up in these rules.
Totally.
And where did they come from? And then suddenly one day you go, oh, hang on. That's right. I make the rules.
Yeah. It's so good. You have to remind yourself, right? Yeah. Like sometimes it's like, hang on a minute, why am I doing this way? And I can actually do whatever I want. Yeah.
Yeah. Something I had made a note of to chat with you about was the channeling that you did for the Biz Alchemy Playground group, and where you were doing those beautiful movements. And I love that you said the light language I speak, or not even what I speak, but the speaking of light language is something that at this point doesn't really flow for you. But I love that you found the way that does flow for you. Yeah. I love that you actually didn't go, I've got to keep going with this. I want to, I want to do it this way. This is because this is how it's usually done. Yes. Yeah. And you didn't. Mm-hmm. You found your way. You found the way that the energy moves through you. And when you did that for the playground ladies, it was mesmerizing. And the energy that came from you was incredible. Wow. And it really opened up my world, because even though I move my hands and I'm aware that I'm moving energy when I'm speaking light language, the absolute I don't even know the word for it when I was watching you at your movements, but there was so much energy shifting. It was beautiful. It was a thing of beauty as well, because it was like you were doing an amazing dance. It was like a dance of a priestess, you know.
Wow,
It was
that's
just
so cool.
incredible. And yeah, I'd love to see you doing more of that.
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting because it was kind of not a spontaneous idea, but I think it might have been, and I just felt like, yeah, do this thing. And it felt quite vulnerable because I've not shared this with many people yet, like in a movement form. And it's not even that long ago that started to flow through, I think it was last year, to be honest. So yeah, so again, it was one of those things like, yeah, let's do this. And it's like, it felt like a safe space to do that. And I think like the importance of intention it's such a big thing, isn't it? Because even though I don't quite understand fully what it is like with my mind, but it's something the mind can't comprehend.
Yeah.
It's not a 3D thing, it's beyond that. So how could I fully understand it? But I do have this desire to understand things and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But again, that's where the trust comes in. It's like, I have my own intention, like my own vibration, I suppose, my own place in that. And I'm like, it's like a transmission or a flowing through of, it's not, even goes beyond the mind, like even the intention does, I feel. So I just felt like, let's just show up and do this thing. And it's almost like I don't know if it's like a zone out or zone in kind of thing, But yeah, so that's where that came from. And it's just, I think, going with the feeling of it, because it just feels really like, it feels really nice. I don't know how else to put it. So yeah, it just comes from this place of like trusting whatever comes, I suppose. Yeah. Which is, I guess, I mean, that's maybe how you work with when you feel like, oh, there's some light language that needs to be spoken, and you just go to a place, you zone in or zone out, and then you let it come through you. And you might not even know what it's going to be.
Yeah, it's exactly how it is. Yeah. And suddenly inside my head, I'm going, oh, that's a funny language. I haven't heard that one before. While my lips are actually speaking the words.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're observing it. Yes. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Exactly.
That's so funny.
So you've got to this point now where you've sort of got, it's like 3 aspects of yourself, because you still have your graphic design business going, don't you? So you've got that, you've got the podcast, and now this channeling aspect that you're really embracing. And so what I enjoy about it is that you've not necessarily tried to bring them all together. Like, you haven't gone, okay, I've got to make this one thing. You've allowed yourself to play with the 3, or certainly that's the point you're in at the moment. And maybe one rises to prominence more at certain points. Like, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, that is very much true, actually. So different parts of that take up a different amount of space, depending on, it's very much a flow. And I kind of observe it rather than try and make it something. But that is also something that I had to unlearn, because that's what we're taught to do, right? You have to make it happen, and you have to, all that stuff. But it's like, no, you have to let it happen from the right place of intention, I guess. In a way, I think for a while I felt like, oh, how do I bring all this together? Like, how do I do this? But then it was also very much getting to a place of like, just let that be what it is when it is. And like, yeah, so the podcast was a very big part of my life for a good while, for maybe a couple of years or 1.5 years. And then now it's not smaller part. Maybe it's like, I think smaller and bigger are not quite the right words anymore, but I don't know what other terms to use, because it's not about importance necessarily. It's more about how much maybe time and energy they take up, So yeah, so I had to kind of change the way I was doing the podcast, so that became, it's a more contained thing. Again, all those words, all these 3D words, like, no, that's not quite right, but it's the only one I've got, so let's just roll with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I think it opened up the space for the light language to come through. And yeah, I feel like there is an integration of sorts to do with my design work and the light language and codes and stuff. So I feel like bringing that together and offering that as part of my design work, that feels really resonant.
Mm.
Because I struggled for ages, like doing, I was a designer, and then I maybe focused on branding for a bit, and then I focused on books, and I was trying all these things out. And it was a good thing that I did, because I was figuring out what didn't quite work, right?
Mm.
But it was very much a matter of, is this working? And like, what is working, what is not working? And especially when I focused on the branding, again, I think when I was doing that, I had not very good boundaries in place, and like I wasn't filtering, and I wasn't saying no to the wrong people and all that stuff. So that was definitely a part of that phase. So now I've got a better I think I've got more trust in myself. I've got a better way of filtering people. So I mean, the practicalities of that I'm still figuring out as I go, and that's okay. But yeah, I feel like bringing that together, bringing the channeling and the intuitive side into my visuals and design work, that just feels like, ta-da, there's the missing piece that I was looking for all this time,
Sure.
There it is.
Yeah, I can see it. And having worked with you with the graphic side for as long as I've known you, I think you always did do that. You did an element of it, but maybe not so blatantly obvious as in this is a channeled code.
Yeah, not consciously. Yeah, exactly. I didn't even know it, because I think we just take for granted how we do things, because we think, well, isn't that normal? Everyone does things this way. It's like, nope, that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So, Esther, if anyone wants to know more about you, how can they find out about you?
Well, there is my website. I feel like I've been bringing all the things together again, because I had like, idea, project, get the domain name. That was very much part of my journey. So I'm bringing it all together now. So I've got one website for my own stuff. It's estherlemmens.com, which is EstherLemmens. So Dutch spelling. So not like the fruit. But yeah, if you Google it, you'll probably find me, especially if you look for queer mystic, because that's another thing I've been trying on for size. And I feel like that term came to me a little while ago, and I was like, I like that. And that's kind of bringing together parts of my identity, like to do with maybe gender and doing sexuality and relationships and doing everything differently in my own way, and also bringing through this, the channeling and light language and all that magic and stuff. So that feels like a really great term. Yeah, so that's the website. That would be the main place. And my podcast is 50shadesofgender.com, as in FIFTY, not the number 50. So those are the two main places. And I do some social stuff, but you can find that all through the website. So
beautiful. And I did check out your website before, because I didn't realize you changed it.
Oh yeah, it's still a work in progress though. Yeah, but
I love the light code at the top. I love the color. I love the way you've written your name, like the font. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, so those are the aspects that sort of came through. But I keep looking at my website thinking, I'm meant to know about this. Do you know what it's like? A bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm meant to do this stuff and know this stuff, and it's a mess. It's a real mess. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like this transition phase. We know what it's like.
We know
it's like
what
everything's
it's like.
in transition, and like this is not quite there yet, and that bit is still in the old. But you just got to be okay with it and just let it be. Yeah.
Well, this is what's happening as we are evolving, because we are evolving faster and faster.
Yeah.
And so to commit our identity to a website is getting harder and harder, because we are shifting so fast.
Yeah. So that's why it's important. I think it's so important to just keep it simple. And like, I think sometimes you have a really good idea of like who you are and what you want that to be, and to really, really go for it and spend and like invest in it, like really invest in it. But I find a lot of the time, it's, especially for me, it's just so good to keep it simple and to keep it not small, but like bite size, maybe is a good way to put it, rather than this massive overhaul. And by the time you finish, you're like, I think I've moved beyond this now, so I need to start again. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, perfect. Okay, so do you have a takeaway message for our listeners?
I would say just do your thing your way and question everything. That's what I'd say.
Oh, I love that. That's what I would say. I'm going to back that, Esther.
Nice.
That's fabulous. It's been so much fun chatting with you and exploring all these different elements to your life, and and this journey to embracing your intuition, really, and how that's impacted your business. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Biz Alchemy. I'm Jacquelyn Atkins. If you'd love to know more about the energy of business, join my newsletter list at jacquelynatkins.com and check out my receiving channel on Patreon at patreon.com/Jacquelyn Atkins. Until next time, enjoy creating alchemy in your biz.